Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Before we introduce our panel, we want to highlight the voices of educators from across the country who couldn't be in DC with us tonight.
Problems are, teachers are already stretched very thin. Our plates are already overly full, and now we are, covering for classmates or for teachers who are out. We are helping writing lesson plans and covering classes. It's just a lot. It takes an emotional toll. It takes a mental toll. It takes a physical toll on us.
I work with children with moderate to severe special needs. Our special education department, we did finally hire somebody in January, but she also left again in January.
We are currently only able to serve 67% of our funded enrollment due to workforce shortages. Our salaries are not competitive.
One of the challenges, and the biggest challenge that we face within our programs, is the ability to retain our staff.
I know of half a dozen people in my district alone in the past year who have left the profession because of all the stress and the teacher shortage, and they're just like, I'm done.
My building trades instructor, my medical careers instructor, both are going to be leaving the classroom and pursuing a career in private industry where they're going to make 2 to 3 times more in salary.
I'm having to consider getting a second job now just to keep up with or to compensate for the cost of inflation. I feel pressured to where I have to go and get a job just so I can earn extra money so that I'm able to afford things, because I'm a single mom and I have 3 children.
One thing I can say about New Mexico is that we have seen some small pay increases coming through our wonderful governor. But I think New Mexico teachers are united in saying that it's still not enough.
I would essentially do 2 jobs in a day. I would substitute in the morning and then assist in the afternoon, and I didn't get paid double for that. I make $14.49. That comes out to like $21,000 a year.
Raising the salaries of teachers across the country will benefit our occupation and the future of education.
Teachers are posting and asking for information and suggestions about the best second jobs that are available to teachers. These are beginning teachers who are dedicated, who want to make a difference in the lives of young people, and they know that the only way that they can do that is to get a second job so that they can make ends meet. That's a problem.
When I'm sitting here with 18 years of experience under my belt and my doctorate, and I'm still picking up side gigs to make ends meet, there's a huge problem in how we're compensating our teachers.
People are excited to do this rewarding work, but they cannot afford to live their lives and pay for their children's health care and things like that, and also be a teacher.
I personally have thought about, I can get a job at a different kind of library. I don't have to be a school librarian, and I have thought about it seriously about leaving the profession, because it's just too much.
I hope one day bringing more knowledge, care, empathy, and joy into this world does not put my own well-being on the line.
Our kids are definitely suffering educationally from the lack of people that are trained to deliver the content and to help guide them through the learning process. And they're aware, especially at the high school level, that they're not getting the level of education that they should be.
It puts a lot of weight on us, and we're carrying the bulk of the responsibility. We're still here. We're fighting, but we're still here.
And now, please welcome Senator Sanders, the chairman of the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, Senator Ed Markey, Becky Pringle, president of the National Education Association, Andy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers, and our esteemed panel of public school teachers, Allison, Tracy, Jacob, and Arthur.
Good evening, everyone. I can tell we have teachers out there, right? As the new chair of the Senate Health Committee, Let me thank all of you who are here tonight at the Capitol Visitor Center, and let me thank the many tens of thousands of Americans, many teachers who are watching all over this country via live stream as we discuss one of the very most important issues facing our country, and that is the crisis in teacher pay and the need to raise that pay. I am delighted to be joined on stage with Becky Pringle, who is the president of the nation's largest labor union, the National Educational Association, the NEA. Representing 3 million educators and their allies throughout America. Becky has over 30 years of classroom experience as a middle school teacher from Philadelphia. And be nice to her. She is recovering from the Super Bowl results. Be very gentle with her. And let me also thank my good friend, Senator Ed Markey from Massachusetts. And let me also thank Randy Weingartner, who is the president of the AFT. In a moment, we're going to hear not only from Becky and Randy and Ed, but also from 4 public school teachers from around the country who will share their stories about what's going on with education today and what teaching has been like during the pandemic. And let me begin personally by saying to our nation's teachers, thank you. Thank you for the Thank you for the extraordinarily important work that you are doing every single day to improve the lives of our kids. You are true heroes and heroines of our country. And it is about time that you are treated with the respect and dignity that you deserve. It is also high time that we got our national priorities right. And when we do that, when we get our national priorities right, we understand that the children of our country are the future. And when we understand that, we know that we should not have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major country on earth. We know that in the richest nation on earth, it is simply not acceptable that children are going hungry or sleeping out in the streets or in their parents' cars or in emergency shelters. If we love our kids, we're going to change the priorities of this nation. If we understand, as I know everyone here does, that we live in a competitive global economy and that we need the best educated workforce in the world, we must understand that it is absurd that there are school districts throughout this country where there are major shortages of teachers. And if we understand the enormously important work that teachers do, that means, in my view, among many other things, that we should be paying public school teachers a minimum of at least $60,000 a year. And I am proud to tell you that I will soon be introducing legislation to do just that. As all of you know, and I hope that your fellow Americans understand it as well, teachers today are experiencing extraordinarily high levels of stress and burnout, all of which has been exacerbated by the pandemic. In fact, new data from EdWeek Research Center shows that almost 20% of teachers, principals, and district leaders have contracted long COVID and are still suffering from that disease. The result of all of that and many other factors is that some 300,000 public school educators and staff left their jobs during the pandemic, and we now have a shortage of some 200,000 public school teachers throughout our nation. In America today, over half of our public schools are understaffed, and to make matters even worse, these teacher shortages disproportionately impact schools that primarily serve students of color and students in low-income neighborhoods. That is not acceptable. These are the kids who need more help, not less help. In America today, 44% of public school teachers quit their profession within 5 years. That is an extraordinarily high number and is something we have got to understand. Why is that? Why are so many public school teachers leaving the profession that they love? Well, as all of you know, there are many answers to that question. But one of the primary reasons is the pathetically low pay teachers receive. In America today, the starting pay for teachers in almost 40% of our school districts is less than $40,000 a year. Further, 43% of all teachers in America make less than $60,000 a year. This situation has become so absurd, and it really tells us about our priorities, that the top 15 hedge fund managers on Wall Street make more money in a single year than every kindergarten teacher in America, over 120,000 teachers. Well, I think it's high time we paid attention to our teachers and not worry so much about hedge fund managers. A very sad reality, and it does tell us something about this nation's attitude toward education, is that teacher pay in America has been stagnant for nearly 50 years. Unfortunately and unacceptably, the average weekly wage of a public school teacher has gone up by just $29 over the past 30 years after adjusting for inflation. Imagine that. And think about what the cost of housing has done during that period, and the cost of health care, and so many other expenses. Wages for public school teachers are so low that in 36 states throughout our country, the average public school teacher with a family of 4 qualifies for food stamps, public housing, and other governmental programs. Can you imagine that? That's the kind of respect we are showing to teachers, that so many teachers need federal help in order to pay their bills. In America today, hundreds of thousands of public school teachers are forced to work 2 or 3 jobs during the school year. Maybe they're driving an Uber. Maybe they are waiting on tables, and maybe they are parking cars. In the richest country in the history of the world, we have got to do better than that. It is time to end the international embarrassment of America ranking 29th out of 30 countries in the pay middle school teachers receive. If we are going to have the best public school system in the world, we have got to radically change our attitude toward education and make sure that every teacher in America receives the compensation that she or he deserves for the enormously important work that they do. And let's be clear, as bad as public school teachers are paid, child care workers are paid even worse. You know, psychologists tell us that the most important ages for human development, intellectually and emotionally, are 0 through 4. That's when we become the people we become. And yet today, the people who work with those little kids, today the average child care worker makes a little over $13 an hour, less than a parking lot attendant or a doggy daycare workers. In my view, there is something fundamentally wrong in our nation, in our priorities, when we pay more to take care of our pets than to take care of our young children. Well, let me tell you what I would like to see, and I know that all of you share that same vision. And that is, I want the day to come sooner than later when we are going to attract the best and brightest young people in our country into teaching. I want those young people to be proud of the profession that they have chosen. I want them to teach in underserved communities, and I want them to help produce the best educated kids in the world. I don't want their classmates in college to say to them, "What? You're going into teaching? Why would you do that?" I want their classmates to understand that there is nothing more important in this country than educating our kids. And I want those future teachers to stand up and be proud and say, "Yes, I look forward to becoming a teacher." In order to accomplish those goals, we have got to pay teachers what they deserve. And that's why I'll soon be introducing the Pay Teachers Act. This bill will triple Title I funding. It will invest in federal programs that support the teaching profession, and not just teachers, but teachers' aides and librarians and all those who work with teachers. And it will ensure that all starting teachers in this country are paid at least $60,000 a year. And it will increase wages for teachers who have made teaching their profession, working on the job. And I want a special thanks to all of those teachers who have been on the job day after day for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years. They're going to benefit from this legislation big time. This legislation will benefit every public school district in every state in our country, which is exactly what we have to do. Now, I know that some of you are thinking, well, all of that sounds great idea, but how are we going to pay for this bill? And what I'm begging you is to think outside of the box. Think about new priorities. So let me tell you just one way that we can begin to pay for this legislation. And that is by demanding that the wealthiest people in this country, at a time of massive and growing income and wealth inequality, that they start paying their fair share of taxes. Legislation that I introduced last Congress to reform the estate tax, which only applies to the very wealthiest people in America, would raise about $450 billion over the next decade, which is precisely how much the Teacher Pay Act would cost. And that legislation would not increase taxes by 1 cent on 99.5% of Americans who inherit less than $3.5 million. So let's be clear. Most of you inherit less than $3.5 million. So let's be clear. And again, this speaks to getting our priorities right. If we can provide over $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1% in large corporations, please don't tell me that we cannot afford to make sure that every teacher in America is paid at least $60,000 a year. If we can spend close to $900 billion last year on the military, more than the next 11 nations combined, please don't tell me that we cannot make sure that every teacher in America is treated with dignity and respect. Let me give you some good news on this issue. As a result of strong grassroots movements led by public school teachers, led by the NEA and the AFT, some states and cities are beginning to move in the right direction. In recent years, the state of New Mexico, for example, has increased teacher pay by an average of 20%. Alabama increased teacher pay by 21%. And the city of Detroit, a city that just a few years ago had one of the worst teacher shortages in America, increased the starting salary of teachers in Detroit to $51,000. And guess what? That teacher shortage disappeared. Raising teacher salaries to at least $60,000 a year and ensuring competitive pay for all our teachers is one of the most important steps we can take to address the teacher shortage in America and to improve the quality of our public school systems. I look forward, and we're going to need your help on this one. I look forward to working with all of you, with the NEA, with the AFT, with principals organizations, with all those people in America who are concerned about our kids. Let us stand together, let's go forward, and let us pass that legislation. And now I'm proud to introduce Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts. Ed.
Thank you, Bernie. And is the United States of America far better off when Bernie Sanders is the chairman of the Education Committee in the United States Senate? So, and teaming up with Rebecca Pringle and Randy Weingarten, all the great teachers on the stage and out here this evening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us virtually as well. The inscription in the Boston Public Library, where I'm from, is the best defense of a nation is the education of its people. We want to protect America? Educate young people in our country, because educators are our North Star from infancy through adulthood. They are there for us, illuminating the path towards a brighter future. They are there in the earliest stages of life as we reach critical developmental milestones. They are there to inspire us to discover our passions and our path, and they are there for us in adulthood. Teachers are more than simply educators in the classroom. They shine a light on what our communities need, ensuring that students also get the food to eat, have clean clothes to wear, have the support, both physical and emotional, to thrive. We have a mental health crisis for young people in our country right now, and it's the families and teachers who are on the front lines of dealing with this crisis. But with this great responsibility comes a great toll. Teachers stand at the forefront of trying to keep students safe and healthy and engaged and on track to achieve. Meanwhile, they are balancing raising of their own families, paying their own debt, putting food on the table. So it's no surprise that at every stage of education, teachers are burning out, and it is our communities, especially our children, that are bearing the consequences. In Massachusetts, led by our great leaders, we have already had many strikes this year, and we've seen raises in the salaries for teachers wherever those strikes occur. And I've been on the lines with those teachers as they strike, because we need higher wages for teachers, for teaching assistants, for early educators, for paraprofessionals. I was a paraprofessional for my first year out of college. I will tell you this. They didn't get paid enough then, and they don't get paid enough now. They're always overlooked as the substitutes for the real teachers. But real teachers know they can't do it without the paraprofessionals there to help them. So we know this. We have to do something about it. I was a paraprofessional, and 2 years ago, the three biggest billionaires in America made more money than every single kindergarten teacher in America combined. Who contributed more to America 2 years ago? Those three billionaires are every kindergarten teacher in our country. The question answers itself. As the great William Butler Yeats once said, education is not filling of a pail, but it is the lighting of a fire in every young person in our country. And increasingly, they're black, they're brown, they're immigrant, but there's another word we can use to describe them, the future of the United States of America. And so we don't have a choice. You're doing God's work here on earth, but there will be no future without your guidance, no future without your essential work. It is time that we finally recognize the value of educators as the guideposts to our nation's future. We need to pay our educators. Educators in our country need a raise because you raise the gaze of every child in our country every single day to the constellation of possibilities for them and their families in our country. As you raise those children's gaze, we have to make sure you get a raise this year. That's why we're so fortunate to have Bernie as the new chairman of the Education Committee. Thank you all so much for everything you do every single day. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed, and it's a pleasure to be working with you on the committee. Now I am proud to introduce Becky Pringle, President of the National Education Association. Becky.
Oh, Well, Senator Sanders, thank you for bringing this smile to my face, because it's still a Philly thing. I'm in mourning today, but it'll always be a Philly thing. I just want to say to you, on behalf of the 3 million members of the National Education Association, we collectively and individually thank you for your tireless activism and advocacy for our students and for our educators and for our communities, and for convening this important event. I'm also honored, as always, to share the stage with my passionate partner, Ms. Randy Weingarten, who is equally determined to find real solutions to this long-standing problem. This is not new. It's chronic. The pandemic made it worse. But this long-standing problem of educator shortages. Of course, I am delighted to join in and hear from our amazing teachers and paraprofessionals who are going to share their stories with us this evening. There are over 570,000 fewer educators than there were before the start of the pandemic. And 55% of those remaining tell us that they are considering leaving the profession. Do we even need to ask why? Certainly the caring and creativity and the courage that COVID required from our educators played their part in the shortages we see today. But the truth is, there's no shortage of people who would like to answer the call to guide and love and teach the next generation. Rather, what we have across this country is a shortage of professional pay for our educators. We have a shortage of basic dignity, a shortage of respect for the people who have dedicated their lives to educating America's students, which means we have a shortage of people who are willing to take on the immense responsibility without the requisite recognition of the critical role they play in our society and in this democracy. All that, and add to it, being thrust into the center of the culture wars. Educators are just trying to do the jobs they love, and they're being subjected to the outright attacks from the far right for simply taking on the responsibility of ensuring every student, everyone, has the resources and opportunities, the access and the support, the ability, the freedom to learn the true history of this country, all that they need and they deserve to be fully human, to be able to fulfill their wildest dreams. We are here today because we believe every student should have access to a caring and committed, qualified educator who will nurture their passion and support their potential. Tonight's testimonies that you heard before and those that you will hear remind us all of the hurdles educators face, and that this multifaceted staffing crisis isn't the warning light or the maintenance required indicator on your car moment. No. This is the engine is on fire, call 911 now moment. That's where we are. We all know that educators have struggled to meet their students' needs with too few resources, with public schools being under-resourced and underfunded, all while being underpaid and disrespected. So this is the question. What will this country do about it? What will we do to honor and diversify and respect this profession? What will we do to address the pay inequities that our educators face that force them to have 2 or more jobs, live far from where they teach, postpone having a family because of their student loans, or be able to care for their own children. When NEA did its report, elevating the profession of educators and addressing the education shortage, that's what we heard from educators all over this country. With the help of lawmakers like Senator Sanders and Senator Markey, we will answer those questions, and we will continue to work on solutions that allow us to reclaim public education as a common good, as a foundation of this democracy, and then transform it into something it was never actually designed to be. A racially and socially just and equitable system that prepares every student, everyone to succeed in this diverse and interdependent world. To do that, we need you to lift up your voice and tell your stories, to say enough of marginalizing you. We need you. We need you to be the activists that we know you can and have and must be to get this done. Thank you so very much for all you do every day for our babies, all of them, to succeed.
Thank you, Becky Pringle. Now let me introduce another great educational leader and a real fighter for social justice, Randy Weingarten, President of the American Federation of Teachers.
Okay, just ditto. Okay, Becky, when you're tired, you're roaring. Becky and I spent a lot of time together pleading, enjoining, not debating, but debating a lot of others. And it feels like we are home today. And so thank you, Senator Sanders, because it feels like today is the first day of the rest of my life. This is a really important moment. I mean, we both have done, both NEA and AFT, and I'm going to give Senator Sanders our report that we passed unanimously this summer. Here today, gone tomorrow. That is just like the NEA's report, chock full of ideas about how to solve the teacher shortage and the para shortage, and how to actually deal with all the issues that we have, because you are, and teachers are, and paras are, and bus drivers are, we are first responders to every single issue that afflicts kids and families in America and the world. And you're going to hear from Jacob Furtag, you're going to hear from Tracy Tucker, you're going to hear from Arthur Anderson, you're going to hear from Allison Sylvester. I understand that Anna King from the PTA, the National PTA, is in the room as well. Amazing organization. You heard from Senator Sanders, you heard from Senator Markey. These are amazing people who have said and have spent their life fighting for not just social justice, but fighting to make sure that when a kid asks a question, that child feels nurtured. That child feels loved. That child feels the possibilities that Becky so eloquently talked about and Senator Sanders so eloquently talked about. And so on the stage and in the audience, to the remarkable educators that are here, I just want to say thank you. You don't deserve to be treated the way you have been treated in so many places, in so many states, in so many tweets. But what happens is that every single day, regardless of that, the through line here is making a difference in the lives of kids. It's about doing right by our students, by our parents. It's not only teaching students the fundamentals and every now and then to think critically when governors allow us to do it, said as a former AP social studies teacher. But teachers are nation builders. We are the pillars of democracy. We prepare our kids to be caretakers of tomorrow's environment. We prepare the sparks that ignite innovation. We prepare the tenders of global relationships. We prepare the guardians of our prosperity. We prepare the creators of our arts. It's impossible to place a value on what teachers do. But we have to, as Senator Sanders said, we have to find a way to create the dignity and respect, and frankly, pay is a way to do that. What does it say when a teacher earns less than a bartender and the bartender gets thanked more, blamed less, and does not have to do endless paperwork? And as Senator Sanders said, teachers are in higher tax rates than billionaires. Yes, teaching is getting harder. And most teachers, thank God, stay. But losing 300 to 500,000 teachers in the last few years, losing 45% of teachers who quit in their first 5 years, there's something wrong with all of that. Most stay, and most districts rely on people who stay because of the intrinsic want to make a difference in the lives of others. But dedication doesn't pay the bills. And passion doesn't pay off student loans. Now, I loved that parents gained a new appreciation for teachers during the pandemic. Remember the meme saying that teachers should get paid $1 million? How quickly some forget. But I loved in the State of the Union when the president said teachers deserved a raise. It was one of the things that got a unanimous standing ovation. And Representative Wilson hasn't forgotten. There's a bill in the House of Representatives that talk about a teacher starting salary at $60,000. And you just heard Senator Sanders about the bill that he's about to introduce that not only says teachers deserve a starting salary of $60,000, but what about everybody who has spent so much time in teaching, 10 and 20 years, and the tripling of Title I so that we actually can reach all the kids in America who have been marginalized by so many others. Thank you, Senator Sanders. We're not asking for the moon. Every teacher should earn enough to afford life's necessities and raise a family comfortably, enough to pay off the student loans that people have taken out to teach other people's children, enough to afford to live in or near the communities in which we teach, and to offset the hundreds of thousands of dollars we all spend on supplies, snacks, treats, food, clothing, etc., etc., etc. Now, that's good for teachers, but it's also good for kids. When I was president of the teachers union in New York City, we actually raised teacher salaries about 43% over 6 years. I love that Michael Bloomberg thought it was easy after many years of fighting. But within 3 months of that first amount, we went from 20,000 uncertified teachers to 2,000 uncertified teachers. Don't tell me that money doesn't matter. But paying teachers is necessary, but not sufficient. It's not the only reason for the shortage, and you heard Becky talk about all of this stuff. Because we have a shortage of professional working conditions, we have a shortage of pay, but we also have a shortage of respect and dignity and voice. Because how is it in this country at this moment in Florida, teachers have to put tarps over their classroom libraries because they're threatened with a felony if they don't? What is it about all of this that we are trusted to carry guns in some places, but not to teach children? So look, parents like and trust their children's teachers, but they don't want their kids to be teachers. 62% of parents would not want their kids to do what they trust teachers to do right now. And that's why it's so important that Senator Sanders has convened all of us for the reasons that Becky also said, because this has to be about advocacy. This has to be about raising our voices, about lifting our voices, about doing things together. Starting with the leadership of Senator Sanders and Senator Markey. But at the end of the day, if we want to change this, if we want to make sure that we in America can actually be the tenders and the nurturers of the children of America and lift all voices and raise all children and make sure they can actually dream their dreams and achieve them, then we together have to support what Senator Sanders is fighting for, what we're fighting for, which is making teaching and public education the priority it ought to be in this country. Thank you.
Well, we should all be proud that we have on the stage two great union education leaders. Thank you, Becky and Randy. Now let's go to the classroom. It's my pleasure to introduce, we have four people in the classroom who are kind enough to join us tonight. And we're going to start with a young woman from my own state of Vermont, Allison Sylvester, who is a middle school social studies teacher from Springfield, Vermont. Allison?
Good evening, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Senator Sanders for allowing this opportunity to happen. It's not often that you get asked to come down from Vermont to speak in front of other educators. As Senator Sanders said, my name is Allison Sylvester, she, her, hers. I am currently in my 23rd year teaching, so while Senator Sanders said I'm young, I am not. During those 23 years teaching, I have taught everything from first grade up to 7th grade. I currently teach 7th grade social studies in my hometown of Springfield, Vermont. So I was asked, why am I an educator? Well, first of all, I decided to join education over 2 decades ago because children matter. Our babies matter. Their futures matter. And we need to help them see that they matter, regardless of where their zip code is, regardless of their gender, regardless of their sexual orientation, regardless of their race and classifications. They matter. And we need to show them that they matter. And we need to see them as who they are every single day. That's why I think most of us, I'm seeing heads shaking. Like, that's why we're here. We're here to support them, to help them thrive, to help them grow. We've all had those wonderful, heart-filling moments where I've helped students read their first word when I taught first grade. Last year when I taught sixth grade math, I had students finally saying, "Oh my gosh, I can divide a fraction." And as someone who cried in the corner of her math class, that was so meaningful. A couple weeks ago, I saw a student who's been working on her layups do her first layup in a game. I mean, those are the moments I can't even begin to say how important they are, not only to them, but to me and their families. So that's why I teach. Those are the reasons why I stay in teaching. But as all the other eloquent speakers before me have said, it's not always enough. There are also all the opportunities that I see taken away from my students on a daily basis. There are all of the things that we know as educators that we put first in their lives that take away from our own lives. And pay can't be one of those. The countless hours that you put in after school, that you put in on the weekends, that you put in over your breaks, that you put in the summer, the classes you take that you pay for on your own, the snacks that you pay for to feed your students, it's not enough. We have to support our educators. We have to support our paraeducators. We have to support every single person who wants to be in education. I have a former student who I'm in communication with, and he was like, "Miss Sylvester, I want to be a teacher." And I'm like, "Yes, you are going to be amazing, and you better do it. You better be watching, and you better do it." You know who you are. And I can't wait. I can't wait to see him teach. The passion that he has, the life experience that he has as a young man of color that I cannot experience, fills my heart with joy. And I hope he maintains that. And I hope that he continues to want to be an educator. And I hope he stays in it. I hope he is not one of those people who is a statistic who ends up leaving school and leaving education in the first 5 years because he can't pay his bills, or he doesn't feel respected, or he doesn't get the support he needs. So when I was asked, why am I a teacher? It's for those kids who grow up to be It's for those kids who grow up to thrive and to see themselves for the better people that I know they are, even when they can't see it in themselves. So again, thank you, Senator Sanders, for providing us this opportunity.
Thank you, Allison. Our next speaker is Tracy Tucker, who is an English teacher from New York.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Senator Sanders and the Help Committee. My name is Tracy Tucker. I teach in Brooklyn, New York, and I became a teacher because my elementary school experience on the edge of the projects in Fort Greene was incredible. And you never knew that you were in the middle of a public housing project. The teachers were amazing and dedicated. They provided enrichment activities, and my principal was so creative in providing spaces and opportunities for students like art and music. And so I wanted to be that teacher, and so I became the teacher. And I ran like the Dickens from middle school, but something about it kept calling me back. So teaching is my second profession, and I became a teacher. I started out as a paraprofessional because I couldn't afford to do the field work and the practicum with no pay. So there was an opportunity called the Career Training Program in Brooklyn, offered by the Department of Education, and they paid for 6 credits. But taking 6 credits at a time is a long way to get a degree. So the supplement was incredible in that it provided medical benefits for myself and my family, but the experience of working with educators in diverse populations and understanding the needs of students with special needs is invaluable. I learned so much working with these groups of professionals, and I worked with students from kindergarten all the way up through 8th grade. So a teacher is a teacher is a teacher. And when I went and became a teacher in 2014, I started to loop up with my students. I started out in a self-contained class. I started out in kindergarten, and now I'm here at 7th, back in middle school. But I decided to extend my license during the pandemic because there was such a shortage of teachers in special education. And that's where I've been for the past 3 years. The support for educators entering the program, there's a real need. At my alma mater, Medgar Evers College, my professor wrote so many grants just to make sure that teacher candidates didn't face the hardship of having to work and commit to their field hours. So she wrote grants of like maybe, I think she secured over $12 million in funding to support teachers. She works really hard because teaching is really important, but it shouldn't just come from the work of a professor or a team of professors. It should be part of what the career ladder of education looks like. And so with that said, thank you again for welcoming me here. And I look forward to empowering and encouraging teachers to stay in the profession and definitely to join the special education community.
Thank you, Tracy. Our next speaker is Jacob Fertig, who is an art teacher from West Virginia. Jacob?
I also want to thank Senator Sanders for allowing us to come here and speak this evening. It's a lot less often that somebody from West Virginia is invited here to speak on anything, so I appreciate that. But on a topic like this, I think it's really important. So I've taught for about 10 years. Most of that's been at schools that are considered low income, high need. I actually taught a class for 4 or 5 years that the sole purpose of that class was to take a handful of kids that had been identified, they weren't going to graduate, they had a lot of issues, and to put them in there and say, just see what you can do with them. And I wasn't the only teacher to do this. Other teachers did it as well, and it was just kind of figure it out as you go kind of thing. And it worked out pretty well, but in that, we dealt with some of the worst issues that West Virginia deals with, issues dealing with suicidal tendencies. Just to give you some data on West Virginia schools real quick. The number of students who are the number of kids who are in parentless homes who are being raised by just a grandparent is 7%, which is more than double the national average. In West Virginia, that's 25,000 kids, which might not sound like a lot, but it's a state with only about 350,000 kids in it. So that's really quite a few. You look at looking at those same numbers, over 10,000 kids are considered homeless, and there's over 7,000 in foster care. So I liked Randy's comment on schools being first responders and school workers, and it's absolutely true, because the first time you identify those problems very often is they come into school and they mention it to a teacher, a cook, a custodian, or that kind of thing. So the big issue for us is the lack of respect, and the number one way that you can show respect kind of systematically is through a significant pay raise. The starting salary for a teacher in West Virginia on the base pay for the state is around $39,000 a year. The average teacher pay for the state is $50,000. Now, if you keep in mind somebody with a bachelor's degree has to work about 20 years to make that much, you see another major problem in West Virginia, which is we have an older population, and so there's simply not people replacing that. In 2018, the teacher shortage was around 750 as far as number of teachers. Now it's over 1,500. And that's not including positions that are filled with uncertified people, or that it's just open positions. They started with it being in math and special education, and now it's essentially everything. So that's a lot of the stuff that we deal with. I'm kind of a data person when it comes to those sorts of things. And as far as our legislature goes in West Virginia, in my respective profession, I'm probably the most hated person on this stage. Our legislature in West Virginia is very hostile towards teachers, and that's just the way that works. We have our state Senate Education Chair, Patricia Rucker, has fever dreams about school librarians giving third graders books about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which might sound like a joke, but if you look at the list of proposed banned books in the state, no less than 5 of them were just books like, who is Ruth Bader Ginsburg? So, yeah, it's a pretty bad situation for us, but a pay raise like this would really go a long way, especially for people in my state to filling those positions. So thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Our next speaker is Arthur Anderson, who is a teacher's assistant from Virginia. Arthur.
Thank you, Senator Sanders, and thank you, President Becky. I'm just honored to be here today. Everyone has told you why I became a teacher. I became a teacher because I wanted to change lives. And I do that because it's my passion. I grew up with a learning disability that I never knew I had until I went to college. It's called dyslexia. And I never knew why I struggled in the classroom. I never knew why teachers passed me on. I was a nice kid, but nobody could help me do what I needed to do. So I struggled. I was lonely and I was depressed. No one came to help me because I was a nice student. I didn't have behavior problems. I didn't cause fighting. I was respectful to my teachers. So he's a nice kid, so I'm going to pass him on. So I went to college and I struggled in my first and second, third year of college because I wanted to change lives. I wanted somebody to care about me, so I care about them. I never wanted a student to feel the way I felt. So people said, why are you going to school when you struggle? Because I understand what it is to be one of them. I am my students. I know what they feel. I know what they feel. I know the loneliness. I know the depression. I know what they deal with every day. So when I started my mentoring program, I know what it is they go through. When I started the choir that I do, I know what they're dealing with at home when people don't recognize you and see you who you are. So that's why I became an educator. But I also believe in fighting, as Senator Sanders. I'm back in school getting my degree to become a teacher. As you all, sometimes we talk about the pay. For the past 31 years, I have been a teacher assistant. I don't even make $31,000 until just this past year. When I went to the school board and told them, you don't even pay me $31,000 a year. And I've been an employee of yours for 31 years. I drive the bus. I have my CDL. I'm a part-time custodian, and I'm in school full time to be a teacher in your school system. I came to change lives. I don't know about you all, but I'm a teacher because I change lives. I have a passion for what I do, and I have a passion for what I'm going to continue to fight for my kids. That's why I'm a teacher.
Thank you, Arthur. What I want to do now for a few minutes is, and we're running a little bit late, so I'm not going to take too long, but I wanted to just have a little discussion with everybody up here on a few issues that I think are on everybody's mind. One is a practical issue, a day-to-day issue we're experiencing. One is a kind of maybe a little bit more philosophical. I'll tell you a story. Just on Saturday, every year with students in the state of Vermont, I do what we call a State of the Union essay. And we have kids all over the state, many, many hundreds, participate. And I ask them, the theme is, if you were President of the United States, what are the issues that you would be talking about? We do it around the same time as the State of the Union address. And the top 15 winners come together with me in the state capitol, Montpelier, and we sit down and we talk about their essays and some other things. We just did that this last Saturday. And here's what these kids were telling me. And just last week, we talked about school violence and we talked about shootings. Just last week, or 2 weeks ago in Vermont, I don't know what you would call a demented person, sends out a message, calls or whatever he does, to schools throughout the state of Vermont, saying that there's a shooting taking place in the school. And Vermont is not the only state that has experienced this lunacy. And then to make it even worse, this genius puts on social media that kids in a particular school have been shot. So all over the state of Vermont, there are lockdowns, all right? And kids are wondering whether their friends in another school have been actually shot, whether something terrible is going to happen in their own school. This is in Vermont. It's happened all over the country. And then I talked to kids about the isolation they experienced in COVID, the disruption for the first time. Modern history of this country. We all went to school. Starting in kindergarten, you go to school. These kids' lives have been disrupted. They didn't get the education that they needed. They didn't see their friends. They didn't play ball. They didn't do theater. Okay? And then on top of that, they're sitting worrying about whether the planet is going to be here for them when they are older because of climate change. So they got all of these things on their minds. So what I wanted to ask all the folks up here is that it is no secret that we have a mental health crisis in this country. All right, what's your perception of the problem? How do you see it? What would you like us to begin to do to address it? Becky, you want to start off with that?
If it's okay with you, Senator Sanders, I actually asked this question as we were standing in the back, and it's exactly what you just said. We've all been in a pandemic, a global pandemic, together. Yet the crises and the issues are finding their way to our schoolhouse doors. And so I asked two of our educators about that issue, and I'd love for them to respond before me. Allison?
So, yes, there's a mental health crisis. And I think one of the ways we can address it is through community schools, is to bring in the services that our students need into the buildings so that we're taking away scheduling appointments, we're taking away of finding a provider. Now, we also need to increase the providers. We do not have enough providers. But one of the things Becky and I were talking about is it's not just our students, it's their families. Our families went through the same thing our children did, except our children can get support at school, and I'm not sure their caregivers can get that support. So we have so many children they're struggling at school with mental health because their family is struggling with mental health and how to pay the bills and how to put food on the table. And their parents experienced the pandemic too. And so we're addressing the children's needs, but we also need to address their caregivers' needs as well.
Okay. Anybody up here want to? Sure. Tracy?
Thank you. Thanks. I agree wholeheartedly with Allison. Definitely bringing some of the services into the school and supporting families as well. We're seeing an increase in absenteeism, and that's impacting the families and the students. In addition to that, support for teachers, right? Because the mental health crisis impacts the students, but teachers also take on a lot of that energy as well. And so, like Allison said, cutting out the providers, one thing my union's done is get teachers access to mental health providers. For the first time in my life, I had to access mental health services because of the impacts of the pandemic. And just like you said, taking out the middleman and encouraging others to have their needs met, and goes a long way in supporting students in the classroom.
Jack, yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, you're on.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on now. I'm sorry. I've seen, and I teach in high school, and what we've seen is I teach ninth graders, and what this pandemic has done, our kids lost 2 years of school. I'm teaching sixth graders, because the last time they was in school was in the 7th and 8th grade. So we have to change how we teach these kids. And so a lot of times we have to meet them where they are. Sixth graders need more love and intention and understanding. And so teachers have to probably reformat the way we're thinking about how to teach these kids. A lot of times I have to tell my boys as a son, what can I do to help you? What can I do to help you to want this? Where is your passion? What do you want? And I try to get that to understand that our job as teachers is to just have more passion and more understanding of where these kids are. So I think we need to get at, our teachers need to understand the neighborhoods. One thing our first principal did, she took us to the neighborhoods when I first joined the faculty and drove us around, and so we could see where these kids come from and see what neighborhoods they come from, the things that they're dealing with, the poverty that they're dealing with. Kids are hungry. So we've gone out and gotten food that we give every week to our students to take home. And this is a high school. We feed them clothes. We have a clothes closet. We want to meet their need. So what we've done, we've asked the parents to bring it, to come, we go going to them instead of them coming to us. We're going to them.
We have a lot of schools with the same sort of needs and the same sort of in my classroom, I had a closet that had food in it that I would send home with kids, and I'd tell them, and sanitary stuff. And until 3 years ago, it wasn't even required that schools carried like tampons and stuff, so I would have those as well, and tell them, you don't need to ask me for any of that stuff. If you need it, just go back there and load it in a bag and get it and take it with you. But there's a big emphasis, or has been, on trauma-informed schools. That's what the kind of paraphrase is. But there's no, if there's not enough people to facilitate that, if there's not enough counselors, there's not enough, a lot of times school counselors are overburdened with testing and other issues they have to deal with. And social workers make less than teachers do, so getting them hired in those positions. So there's a lot of issues. You can give lip service to it. You can dump money at it even. But the issue is, if you're not putting that money in a way that's going to incentivize people coming in, it doesn't matter how much money you put in the program. You don't have people to fill the positions.
So, listen to how amazing they are. So there's a lot of things that we ought to do. But I want to go back to one of the things that you said about community schools and why that's so important. We, by the way, as a union, we now have a trauma benefit for all of our members. And we have done this for the last 2 or 3 years. And our locals
like the U of T, do something deeper, but we make sure that it's available for everyone. Because if you think about all of what's going on, so the pandemic was a deep wound, but so are all the shootings. So are so much that happens for kids, and you, Senator Sanders, have done so much to lift up all of these issues. When you said the work about childcare, if kids, particularly high school kids, a lot of high school kids didn't come back to school. What are they doing? They're working. There's not childcare. They're attending to their kids. They're attending to their younger kids. So there's a lot that we need to do in terms of meeting, and they've all said it, but I want to just dwell for a minute on this community schools and wrapping services around, which is that all of these issues are going to affect school teachers and schools and principals and bus drivers and paraprofessionals anyway. So if we actually really think about school as center of community and bring a lot of the other services that are around somewhere into the school and wrap those services around, and also wrap aftercare and, you know, midnight basketball and all of these other things, so that a family feels like the school is home. We can't do it all ourselves, but if we had those services wrapped around, then we could actually use the school, which is one of the only places sometimes people trust government. And so that's why I think I just wanted to dwell on that, because the more we can do that, the better we will be able to, both short-term and long-term, address many of the well-being issues.
And Senator Sanders, if I could end with this, you know, if our teachers and support professionals aren't healthy, our students aren't healthy. We have to focus not only on the mental health of our educators, but the mental and physical and emotional health of our educators, our parents, our families, all of them, all in service. And this is why we're all here. All in service of being worthy of our babies.
Let me just say that community schools is something that our committee is going to look at and do everything we can to expand. And I'll give you, just on a personal level, years ago I brought some money into the city of Burlington to help establish a dental clinic in a low-income school. And then they expanded that so all the kids in the city could take advantage of it. It had a profound impact on lowering dental decay among children. Very simple thing. Bring a dental office, a dentist into a school. So I think we have to expand that concept, and some cities are doing a really good job on that. Let's learn from them. Let's go forward. All right, the last question that I wanted to ask. Dealing with mental health is a very practical issue. It exists. We're all trying to figure it out. But I want to ask a more philosophical question, if I can, and it was kind of inspired by Kelsey Labar, who is from D.C., apparently originally from Texas, who asked, why do you think other countries respect the profession, teaching, more than here? And let me expand on Kelsey's question and ask this. And as a nation, we don't deal with these issues. The media certainly doesn't. My colleagues often don't. Why are we the only country on earth not to pay teachers the kinds of salaries that deserve, not only not to respect teachers? Why are we the only major nation not to have health care for all? Why are we the only nation not to have paid family and medical leave? Why is our child care system uniquely in the world a total disaster, etc.? All right. In other words, everybody gives a speech about how much they love the children, right? Children are the future of America. We all know the speech. We've heard it a million times. And yet we treat children and those who work with children with contempt and disrespect. I know that's a big question. Why is that, do you think?
I think that it's because the America of the 1940s and 50s built the infrastructure of the world as far as rebuilding Europe and the United States, roadways and education systems and everything. They kind of stuck with it. We went in a different direction with that. So I think that whenever you started to go into the post-70s into the 80s and 90s and stuff, you can see a trend moving away from this idea that there are certain things that we own publicly. That's in West Virginia. One of the bills that was passed in the last year or two was the student voucher bill, which basically says if you choose to homeschool or send your kid to a private school, which does not have to follow ADA, IDEA, any of those kinds of things, don't have to accept special needs kids, you can pull $4,500 a year per student out of that district to send that kid there. And we're already a poor state, and it seems like they've forgotten that when you're paying for the infrastructure of public education, you're paying for that for everybody, not just for your kid to go to school. And so I think that that's what you see a lot of. There's a lot of this me mentality. It's me, 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 and it's not about, there's some things we need to just have for everybody that's like nice, you know.
Allison, Randy, do you want to say a word on that?
So the first lesson I ever taught as a high school social studies teacher at Clara Barton High School in Brooklyn, New York, was on the Lockean social contract. And the reason I start there is because, and you remember your first lesson. I also remember that my principal walked in 5 minutes into that lesson. But the reason I start there is that this country has always fought between individual I, and what we do together as community. And public education is one of the few things that was what we do together as community. And I think that we never learned the lessons, frankly, that Western Europe learned in the aftermath of World War I and World War II. And as we get further and further away, and frankly, I want to give Senator Sanders credit for this. Senator Sanders and Senator Warren and others have come into the Senate and talked about how we need that social contract, how we need, you heard him tonight about childcare, how we need to make sure that we actually improve Social Security and Medicare and have that safety net for our young ones and for our seniors. But we have always had this fight in America about individualism, and I alone have done it, versus the collective good that makes that Western Europe has actually understood. And I think that we are in a moment of time again about being in those throes of it. Vouchers versus public education. The last thing I'll say about this is we've both done a lot of polling of parents and voters. And the polling we're seeing is in the aftermath of COVID, parents and communities actually get that public education is really important. They get that family and medical leave is important. They get that these kinds of things are ways in which we can all climb up an opportunity ladder. And our split we've seen in asking the question, if you had to make a choice between strengthening public schools and choice for kids in school, what would you do? And it's an 80-20 split in terms of strengthening public schools. People get this in the aftermath of COVID. The real question becomes, what is going to be, and Becky said this earlier, and you said it too, Senator Sanders, what's going to be the work we all do to take that public good and public sentiment and translate it into reality?
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay. So I just wanted to go back, wanted to understand that the question was, why is it that there's a lack of respect for public education? And because it's February, I'm going to say that education is power, and knowledge is power, and it's a power that's been held back from so many groups of people. Legally, legislatively, we have to teach students that a lot of people didn't have the right or access to learn how to read, because when you learned how to read, you could do things like pass voting tests. And so when you think about so perhaps there's a fear, right? When you educate people, and when you educate people well, you lose some control and you lose some power. So that's one theory.
Yeah.
I also want to go back to that initial question about why is education not respected? And I'm going to also name a difficulty, because the majority of educators throughout the centuries are female. In Vermont NEA also has done its own polling, and 77% of the teachers in Vermont are female. 80% of our paraeducators are female. So when historically, and then I don't even know about childcare, but I can say it's probably a lot more than 80% of our childcare providers are female. So when you go back to historically why education is not respected in this country, it's because who has been providing the education.
It's late, and let me wrap up. First of all, let me thank all of our great panelists. They did a great job tonight. You know, and just pick up on a point that Randy made, and that is the American people are with us. The American people want their kids and all kids to have a decent education. And our job is to convince my colleagues, your representatives, your senators, to get our priorities right. We don't need to give tax breaks to billionaires. They're doing just fine. And I don't want to be overly dramatic, but you know, this is America. We are the wealthiest country on earth. There is really no rational reason why we cannot have the best educational system on earth, which certainly must include making sure that our teaching profession is well paid and well respected. Thank you all very much.